another live stream. This is going to be a Ukraine live stream breakdown, right? Yesterday's, we had a lot of people coming by, a lot of questions, hopefully a lot of answers, a questionably designed Word document breaking down how to invade a country by Paul. So yeah, I thought to myself, you know what? Let's bring it back, right? Let's run it all over again. Well, we're not going to run it all over again. It's going to be different this time, right? Because it's been 24 hours and things have changed somewhat. Did I see the morale cringe on Reddit? I saw the morale cringe on every social media. Yep. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Map tracking the war from the New York Times, BBC. Yeah, we'll try this live view map. Nope. It's down. Refresh. All right, well, we're not going to repeat that then. Okay, so yeah, I don't know if this map is all that updated. Let's let you guys see it real quick. There we go. Okay. All right. Okay, so here's sort of the overall situation, right? What it seems to have happened is that Russian forces have continued to push, or have rather made their main pushes into the country. What's fascinating to me is that, of course, they've come from the north. They've come from the north, the west, and from the northeast and south in sort of three main thrusts, right? The chief of which is trying to get into the capital city of Kiev. And what is interesting is that while the Russians have made some considerable advances, it doesn't seem like there has been reports that any major population center that wasn't already a separatist area has fallen into Russian control. Let's see if we can add the borders on the map. There should be like, nope. Draw shape, satellite. Maybe I want satellite. Do I want to switch over to satellite? No, it's like getting DDoSed. Don't do it. Oh God, I don't want to sign up. Do I think the Russians will leave Chernobyl? Probably not. Not anytime soon. Okay, so we've got this map. You guys can kind of see it. Oh yeah, there we go. Here's a good example of areas that appear to be under Russian control, right? You can see they haven't actually seized that many population centers, other than the Crimea, which is already held by separatists, right? This interesting, strange, small border by Moldova. Yeah, there's a fair amount. Uh-oh, it's an ant. Right. So what does this mean? Well, I think what it means, first, another interesting facet to the Russian strategy is apparently they have not engaged their full force. They still have 2/3 of their combat power in reserve. And I think what is interesting is that having this much combat power in reserve is something you would not see in U.S. forces. U.S. forces are trained doctrinally to keep around 25% of their combat power as a reserve, but the rest should be pushed into the offensive. Now, what I think maybe the thinking is that Russia has a lot of heavy mechanized forces, and Ukraine's infrastructure is iffy at best. And so I think what they are considering is that they are basically that there's too many mechanized forces in that would try to push in, right? So Russia almost has to do it in phases because they would create a traffic jam of their own making, right? It would be too easy to create big logistical backlogs, right? For example, you can't get fuel to your tanks at the front because there's 100 tanks on the road behind them, right? So I think that's why Russia may be doing this sort of phased entry into the country. It may also, another theory that someone had was that supplies and troops would be airlifted into the country once they capture airports. But I think that may be, it's just hard to move a lot of massed formations of troops and supplies in via aircraft. It's hard to do if you have a lot of aircraft and Russia doesn't, and it doesn't really have air superiority right now, right? Yeah, exactly. As you guys pointed out, right, bridges blown up, Russian trucks already creating large traffic jams on the highways. So do I think Russia will try to take Chernobyl? I believe they already hold the site, right? And I think actually trying to wrest control of Chernobyl back is dangerous and probably not a priority. So what does it look like the Ukraine defenders' strategy is? Well, I think chiefly it is probably to force the fight into population centers, right? And interesting. Hacking. This is interesting that they have the symbols they have for things. Right. It talks about Russian troops driven out of the city, Melitopol. Yeah. So, Canada wants to get Russia out of SWIFT. Very interesting. Okay. So this is okay. So here's what I think the defender strategy is. As we pointed out yesterday, the Ukraine military has their closest advantage, their closest parity is in actual dismounted infantry. Russia has vastly more tanks, vastly more aircraft than Ukraine, but the advantage is that you have to make sure that if you're Ukraine, you have to fight the attackers in places where their tremendous advantage in mechanized forces and aircraft aren't that much of an advantage. And that is, of course, going to be in urban centers. And so the reason you want to have this, right? You want to try to draw this fight in urban centers is because in really close quarters, tanks and other armored vehicles actually are too big for their own good. If you are able to box them between buildings, right? Imagine driving down a narrow city street and you can disable one or more of the lead vehicle, right? And you can disable the trail vehicle. You can trap them into place, forcing them to dismount, and then you get a soldier on soldier fight. And it's even better because an attacker in an urban environment has an incredibly difficult job ahead of them. That's because it's almost impossible to get and maintain security, right? You have to think, imagine this is actually what the Chechens pioneered. And the irony is that Russia hasn't really seemed to have evolved its tactics enough to put a stop to this. What you probably will see is something like drawing the Russians into these urban areas is what appears to be the strategy, and then forcing them to, again, bring their armored columns in, take casualties, dismount, and then they have to clear building by building, street by street in order to secure any population centers. And it's easy for defenders because defenders have a plethora of buildings they can occupy, right? And the Russians, in contrast, have to clear these buildings out to advance. And even if you clear a building once, hey, thanks for the sub, Domathan. Even if you clear a building once, if you don't hold that building, the defenders can reoccupy it, right? They can literally circle around the city and appear at your back. Because you are seen as the friendly defender, you are much more likely to have a populace that won't report on you. You can even blend into the populace. So there's a lot of techniques that benefit the defenders, right? And you also have this problem where it's incredibly, incredibly slow, where you have to deploy, right? Every time they want to push into the city, they'll find themselves potentially stopping, deploying dismounted troops, clearing a building. Even if you confirm the building is clear, that takes, 30 minutes up to 2 hours, depending on the size of the building. Then you have to mount back up and continue to push. So that's why I think that is probably the strategy that Ukraine is pursuing. It can be dangerous because Russia, in the U.S., like the U.S. forces, right? We would never. Thanks for the sub, Kodiak. Right, U.S. forces, we're never going to level a city block. It's just not what we do. It's a potential war crime violation, and we respect cultural sites. And so for the U.S. forces in, say, like Fallujah, we would enter those buildings, clear them individually, and advance. We would try to have a secured perimeter that sort of expanded as we cleared building by building. It was incredibly slow going and extremely intensive in terms of manpower and resources. And even when we did it, it wasn't that effective. Buildings were still constantly being reoccupied by insurgents. So it would make sense then that this sort of urban combat is a really effective tool that the Ukrainians will rely on to just draw in and drain Russian forces. And yeah, I think it's really important. I think the idea that the Ukrainians are leaning heavily on an armed populace is also huge, and that is because you want to create the maximum threat level, right? Okay, so you notice that a lot of Russian columns moving to the front lines have very, very, very low defensive postures, right? If you looked at, say, a U.S. patrol, logistics patrol in Iraq or Afghanistan, you would see a way higher security posture. Gunners would be up, they would be looking around, turrets would be pointing in the right directions. In contrast, you watch a Russian BMP column. Let's see if we can actually find one here for you guys. Let's see. Oh, come on. All right, hold on one sec. I have my keyboard plugged in all day, and yet it's still somehow out of battery. Sort of problematic. More than a little problematic, I suppose. But that's all right. So I'm gonna try to find you guys a picture of Russian columns moving to the front lines. And the reason I want you guys to see this is because it really shows just how low the Russian defensive posture is, to the point where you almost want to see, an organized Ukrainian resistance would. There we go. Let's give that a shot now. There you go. Russian columns in Ukraine. Let's look up some images. Oh, these are literally columns. Boom. Let's see. Here's an armored column. Here's a tank. Yep. Here's another. Okay. So let's see what this is. Where's this from? Let's see if we can get a date here. Okay, 60 miles away from the Ukraine border. All right, then that's not quite right. It's not what I want. There we go. Okay. Russian service members. Where's this from? Nope, this is from some time ago. Man, why is this tough to find? Let's just do Russian troops in Ukraine. Oh yeah, so I'm not gonna look at Macro Dude, you're right. This is not Afghanistan, but I think you're gonna see some elements of what's called asymmetric warfare. That's where one side and the opposing side have very different armed force makeups. And there's optimal strategies for everything from where you are the superior force to when they are the superior force, and exactly what sort of advantages they have. The Taliban or Iraqi insurgents had an asymmetric strategy optimized for to fight against an air power based military like the United States. Russia has a mechanized based infantry or based military. And so there are optimal strategies for fighting that. And this block by block city fighting is probably one of the classic ones. It's well established, and there's not really a great counter unless you again have something like the US that relies on ultra precision munitions. Then you may be able to then you can start to clear out cities potentially. All right, let's see if we can find ourselves. Here we go. Right, here's you can always count on the Daily Mail to just be shameless, publishing every photo they can get their hands on. Let's take a look. Okay, so here is a good example of this is a Russian soldiers in BMP-2s moving towards Ukraine in Crimea. Okay, also not a great example. I don't really want to, no, I don't want to show these. Okay, I'm trying to find Russian troops in Ukraine. Russians. I mean, I understand that like a lot of press probably aren't out there like displaying these things, but maybe right here. Okay, here's the Enquirer. Let's see what we got. Oh yeah, old Philly. Ukrainian service and personnel carrier. Okay, well, it says they're Ukrainian. Man, I'm trying to find it. I really feel like I've seen pictures of Russian forces looking just a little pretty casual, right? Pretty relaxed. And it's not a great look. Let's see. Here's another one. Here we go. Also, okay. I mean, again, this is in Crimea, but I think this is illustrative of what I'm talking about. You can see these guys are chilling on top of this vehicle, and this is common from other Russian engagements, right? This is more or less how you'd see Russian troops ride in a BMP, and you can see that they have a pretty low security posture. They're exposed. There's no cover. There's no concealment, and there's not really they're not prepared for an engagement. They don't think they're going to be engaged, right? They're not at the front. And what can happen is if you have even a low level but persistent threat across the country, again, usually from a population that is either civilians who are armed, right, who then become combatants, but armed civilians, or an insurgent movement or guerrilla movement that relies on things like IEDs. And you can't have this posture, right? You'll take needless casualties. Again, a grandma with an AK and a really good sight picture can inflict a casualty just on these guys chilling here, right? So, yeah, infantry on armor, dead. Yeah, I'm familiar with the idea, but these BMPs are meant to be troop carriers. Why have armored troop carriers if you can't put troops in them? Yeah, they all love riding on these BMPs and BTRs, and it's because the reason they can do that is because there's no persistent threat, right? It makes perfect sense. Once they get closer to the fighting, they will go inside their BMPs or they will deploy on foot adjacent. And what you want to do by arming your population is potentially, if you have the resources, right, to disperse arms, which I'm not sure Ukraine does. I'm not sure it has more weapons than soldiers. You want to create this persistent threat across the country. And doing so means that every single logistics convoy, every resupply move, all of it requires more soldiers, more defenders, right? It's a drain on the main invasion force. It prevents them from consolidating their combat power to mass effect, right? This is one of the ways that insurgent movements, what are called hybrid wars, right? Where you have insurgent movements, you have cyber attacks, and you have conventional forces all working in concert, can be a really effective means of warfare, because it means that, again, something like Russia, you have to divert some of your combat power to just protect your rear areas, your supply lines. You have to divert your combat power to, like the US had to do, and constantly clear your routes to ensure that you had freedom of movement, right? And then you are just like, it just diverts so much resources and combat power that you can never achieve the massed fires and the mass of troops to launch an effective conventional attack. And if it works together, it can be really, really effective. Again, let's see what you linked to here. Guardian. Okay. Okay, I got you. All right, this seems appropriate. Okay, thanks to this macro dude. Yep, this is the Ukraine border with occupied Crimea. And yeah, this is them entering the country. And don't get me wrong, someone with a high level of security, almost certainly, right, someone with a higher combat posture cleared this route, and these guys are just a trail element. But again, this is early in the conflict, but still an insurgent, right, in Iraq or Afghanistan. If this was a base, if we were leaving a secure area, the defensive posture would be extremely high, because the risk of an IED, the risk of an ambush instantly increases once you've left your secure area. And so you have to change your posture. And obviously, this is a very casual posture. Oh, whoops. I'm sorry. Yes. Sorry, let's back it up. Okay, so as you can see, this is The Guardian, right, a legitimate news source, showing Ukraine, basically Russian troops crossing into Ukraine. This is them crossing the border with occupied Crimea. Right, you can see this is just fuel trucks. There's no security elements at all. This is Belarus and Ukraine. This is Russian forces crossing into Belarus. You can see there's obviously these are combat vehicles forming maybe the lead elements of a convoy. But it's just, you can see all these people riding atop the vehicles, not really under any cover, pretty exposed, and they're just transiting to a combat zone. They don't think they're actually in one. Right? They're not treating it appropriately. So not appropriately. It's perfectly appropriate for this combat situation because there's no persistent irregular threat. So that's, I think, a really important function of the defenders. I think that's why they're trying to step up their armed populace. It's one of the things that's interesting. I saw an article that said the Czechs had actually given Ukrainians a large number of 155 shells, and they were like, what are they going to do with 1950s artillery? Without getting into too much detail, because I don't want to, get banned from Twitch, a 155 shell, I can tell you from personal experience, is a real MFer if you run over it and someone sets it off. And it can definitely take out a tank. And more importantly, it can stop an entire armored column. As you saw there, those tanks in a straight, steady column. So if you can blow up one, it's going to hold up the entire operation. RM, I have heard that as well, that Russia's best troops, like the VDV and such, that they are deployed to some of the airports. There were some Russian Marines that did an amphibious landing. But the vast majority probably are conscripts, but there still should be trained conscripts unless this is a function of their commanders. Their commanders aren't emphasizing that this need to be secured, or they don't care, which is also highly likely that Russia believes it has such vast manpower superiority that they don't really have to rely on such things as individual tactics and techniques. The U.S. doesn't operate this way. It emphasizes at an extreme level individual soldier behaviors and equipment and maintenance and strategy and movement. So, yeah, it's... okay, Desk Cookies, I did see that story. I'm trying to avoid... so I did see that story. I'm trying to avoid I'm trying to keep the discussion as meta as possible, or as zoomed out as I can. Keep it at at least the tactical level. I don't want to get into specifics because this is a real war on both sides. Someone pointed out that these Russians may be conscripts. Who may not have been given a choice in any of this, right? In a way, they may also, some of them, be victims of this geopolitical war. And so I don't want to fall into the trap of valorizing everyone and demonizing another. Obviously, there's an aggressor in this war and defenders in this war. But I don't want to take real people's individual stories and use them as Twitch content, right? I have a lot of background in military strategy. I have a whole diploma on a master's from Johns Hopkins in national security affairs. So I'm happy to talk about this as my area of expertise. Where I don't want to talk about is turn individual people and their stories as part of entertainment. That's why I don't really want to show like combat clips. Definitely don't want to show anyone who's been hurt or wounded any faces. And I'm a skeptic of the more salacious stories that come out of here. A lot of them may be propaganda. A lot of them may be misinformation. Certainly, Russians are excellent at it. It is absolutely a part of their strategy. And so if we hear a salacious or clickable story in a combat zone, the things that come out of it, it's highly likely, not highly likely, it's just as likely as anything else that it's false or exaggerated or not 100% true. And so I'm trying to keep things as meta as possible. Macro Dude, I agree. And the Pentagon seems to agree as well. They've said that Russia, the Pentagon's intel has been pretty spot on, and that they have reported that Russia is pretty frustrated at the level of resistance they've encountered. And I think the other truth is that Ukraine has been pretty persistent in preparing for a Russian invasion. It's not clear how much Russia has been preparing to invade Ukraine. They've had their armed forces involved in Syria. They have, and people do tend to fight harder when they're defending their homes. Absolutely true. But in a way, you can be very effective when your military has a singular purpose. And Ukraine, it's not a singular purpose. It has two purposes. One is to secure their territory against the separatists, right? And to fight against the separatists, and also to prevent and deter and defeat a Russian invasion. Do I think NATO will interfere? Not a chance. Not a chance. Yeah, Ukraine does have also a very experienced military, and that definitely counts for a lot. So what is Putin's long-term goal? Judo, we've discussed this in other streams. There's two possible goals. It seems overall he wants a buffer between Russia and NATO. Right now, he can achieve that through a couple of ways. First, he can, enter Kiev, depose the previous government, install a favorable government, and have that government pledge fealty of the entirety of Ukraine to Russia. It will be tough to govern Western Ukraine. I think there's now a lot of arms throughout the country. And it's an area that's very, very pro-Western. I think he will actually depose the government in Kiev, enter Kiev, and force Ukraine to cede its eastern territories where there's strong pro-Russian support anyway. And he will use those territories all along the Russian border to create his own Ukraine East that will be the buffer between Russia and NATO. I think that's more likely, right? I think I don't think he wants direct conflict with a NATO country, and I don't think it will be. It wouldn't be easy to govern a country that so much of the population hates you. But I've said that he has done so in Chechnya. Chechnya has exactly that. For a long time, it was separatist. He found a pro-Russian strongman affiliated with a certain tribe in Chechnya and has installed and supported that person as the head honcho of the Chechen and Dagestan region. Okay, do I think Finland and Sweden will join NATO? It's not clear to me if this will deter them from joining NATO, which I think is Putin's intent, or if it will encourage them to join NATO. If they do, they should join NATO immediately, as fast as humanly possible, preferably in some sort of emergency basis. They won't be coming to Belarus because Belarus is already firmly in the Russian orbit. Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's tough to say, right? What you don't want to do is consider joining NATO, but have the process be slow enough that Russia can mass forces on your border as well. All right. Yeah, is this showing that the Russian military is a paper tiger? This is an interesting question that a lot of people have. One day is not the entire war. Russia is withholding a lot of its combat power, but it may just be it may just be doing that just to stay out of its own way. So it's not clear whether Russia, overall, this is still an illustration of that Russia is not quite the highly effective military that it sort of bills itself as. That said, quantity has a quality all its own, and they can win just on numbers, right? They can just keep throwing conscripts at the problem until it goes away. Though they tried that in Chechnya, and boy, did it take a lot of conscripts before that went away, right? Yeah, RM, that's a better point. Is it a paper tiger? Maybe, but it's definitely a bottlenecked and old tiger, right? We're seeing this. If you look at, let's take a look at the Russian invasion of Afghanistan back in the day, right? Of Afghanistan, and you'll just get a sense of, let's see, just how little has changed. Yep. Here we go. I think this may actually be the withdrawal. Yep, this is during the withdrawal, actually. This is during the withdrawal from Afghanistan. You can see literally nothing has changed. These actually look like very much the same vehicles. These were in 88, right? And let's see if we can compare it to, there's the Russians in modern day. You can see they still do not have moderns. They have iron sights on their weapons still. Okay, sorry, I'm throwing you guys off. Still have iron sights on their weapons. That's the same PKM machine gun. This BMP might be slightly updated, but man, not by much. So you can see this is just not a lot of. There's just not a lot of change in the Russian military mindset. And it's worrying because, right, again, here you go. This is them preparing on the border. It's not worrying. It's just silly because it's like, okay, this isn't you're predictable. It's so easy to predict and to counter this. And someone like Ukraine, who has focused like a laser on this, on countering the Russian threat, is Icarus, it's true, but the PKM was designed in the 60s. And the US, for example, has gone through at least one major update since the Vietnam War. And it's hasn't fielded the M60 in some time. And if you looked at a modern US weapon, let's see if we can find a US soldier leaving Afghanistan, right? US soldier leaving Afghanistan. Let's take a look at their gear and we'll have a sense of the evolution that's happened in the couple of the 2 decades, right? Since the US has been in and the U.S. has been in combat in Afghanistan. Okay, so let's find a good example. Here we go. Here's some of the Marines from. This is a. Let's see if we can open this picture. Open image in new tab. Perfect. Okay, and then.
There have been a lot of comparisons between the fall of Kabul and the fall of Saigon.
All right, I don't want to hear this guy talking. Here's what I do want. All right, let's take a look. Here is U.S. forces in Afghanistan during the withdrawal, right? You can see they have plate carriers. They have ACOG. They have their ACOG. They have their transparent Magpul mags with the visible ammo counts on the side, collapsible stock. Every one of them has night vision devices with the mounts just ready to clip in. Smoke grenades. He has a shotgun, probably with non-lethals. You can see that this is a very advanced. These are actually a different type of helmet than the Pasgit that the original invasion had. Let's look at the 2001. We'll do the 2003 Iraq invasion because that's more apples to apples, right? All right. Let's see, Iraq invasion, 12 years later, boom, here we go. Here's a perfect one. Here's a great shot of this guy's gear. If we can find it. Okay. Nope. Here we go. Here's a guy, here's the original Iraq invasion. Different type of helmet. M16, looks like an A2. Interceptor body armor, sure. But an LBV, no Picatinny rails, just full uniform. This is night and day, right? These guys are very, very different in terms of their individual equipment. And we don't even have to go into, let's see, these are the Humvees from the original 2003 invasion. Look at these things, right? Now let's look at the MRAP, right? This is what the U.S. forces are going to be rocking now. They actually use MATVs, but my point remains, right? If you see these pictures and you realize, you're like, oh, the U.S. combat strategy has been massively evolved in 2 decades. Now we look at the way the the Russian forces are in Afghanistan. When you contrast their Afghanistan operations and their Chechnya operations with their operations in Georgia and their operations now in Ukraine, and you realize, you're like, hey, these guys haven't done the same level of evolving in a strategic way. Mackerel dude, yes, the early MRAPs I have actually. They called them armored cars. I think I actually have a book with illustrations on them. I have the only book that I could find published on the South African incursions into Angola. But yeah, this is I think ultimately, right, when you have this conscript army, and I think Russia's like airborne troopers, their VDV. Let's see if we can find that picture. I think those guys have had a huge evolution, right? Let's try to find it. Russian paratroopers in Ukraine. Okay, aerodrome captures. Let's see if we can find an image. Ukraine claims to capture 2 Russian paratroopers. Are these them? I don't think so. Those don't look right. Parading caption Russian paratroopers. Here we go. Ukraine arms civilian, Russia advanced on Kiev. Okay, this might be what I want. Oh, don't give me that. Okay, fine. These are Ukrainian soldiers. Okay. Yeah, this is all right. Let's see if we can find the Russian paratroopers. I thought there was the video, right? Wasn't there like video of Russian paratroopers in let's see. Russian paratroopers video. Sometimes they're tagged as special forces, right? Um let's see. Russian paratroopers. Oh, apparently. Okay, apparently the video might have been fake. All right, Russian soldiers airport. Is that what I want? Yeah, the VDV at the airport. The CNN reporter was talking to exactly. Here we go. Here we go. Here he is. Okay, let's get this up. I don't want to play copyrighted stuff, but I do want to just pause it on a certain point here where you can kind of see their equipment just for an equipment breakdown. Pause. Ah, damn it. Okay, let's see. This looks more modernized, right? So we can kind of see there's a shortened, looks like an AK-101, shortened barrel, looks like a collapsible stock. And right, he's got like a plate carrier. This looks like a modern Ratnik helmet. These guys are the professionals. Look, this looks like an Attack 2 backpack. Though they may also have their paratrooper packs, which have a top and bottom. You can see this guy on the side, right? He looks like he's at a US level of equipment, right? I think you can even see here on the side, this may be a optic. This may actually be an aftermarket, or not an aftermarket, but a Picatinny rail and an optic. Let's see if we get close again. Yep, you can see there's an entrenching tool in this guy's backpack. Yeah, it looks like maybe an Attack 2 or one of their Ratnik like backpacks. But boom, you can see here, this looks like another this looks actually like a frame. Yeah, and look here, you can see this guy on the left. He's actually got a high cut helmet, right? Like an ops core. So this is obviously an actual group of professionals. And looks like the quality just dropped. Let's get this quality video settings. Never mind. This is what I'm getting. Okay, Yep, they have even what look like friend and foe identifiers. Let's move this right forward. How clear can we get this? It's still kind of blurry. It's not focused on them. And looks like maybe they cleared out of here. Okay. So, but you see what I mean? That they're top level troopers. They're actual volunteer units. Their actual volunteer units, like the airborne troopers, are extremely well equipped. They're equipped probably to like a modern US standard. And this isn't to say that the Ukraine military also doesn't have some like questionable equipment choices, but they have, but the conscripts are they're still Chechnya. They're still in Chechnya, basically. Same strategy, same formations. There's just this sense in Russia where I think you have your professional soldiery, and then you have the dregs, right? The conscripts who are just basically cannon fodder, or a little better than cannon fodder. Some basic training, some basic ability to use their weapons and follow orders and such, but that's about it. 415, yeah, I don't think they're Spetsnaz. I'm saying they're probably VDV guys, like paratroopers, that dropped in. They have like a standard issue paratroopers like Ratnik kit. They may not be fast, but that was definitely a high cut helmet that at least the one trooper had. But my point is that they looked loosely analogous to the modern U.S. forces that we looked at in Kabul. Yeah, those guys were not Spetsnaz. They were not that top tier. As far as I can tell, Spetsnaz wear multicam and have the same sort of civilianized gear, or like aftermarket gee whiz gear that U.S. Special Forces have. They may even have, in some cases, they may have the exact same stuff. Yeah. So I think Russian conscripts are conscripted. My understanding is that Russia has true conscription for many of its forces, and then from those conscripts, I think it draws forces into its volunteer units that are better, like the VDV. VDV is their paratroopers, like sort of like their 82nd. So yeah. Are armed civilians considered combatants? Yes, they're considered combatants. It's not clear if you're ununiformed what your status is. You may not be a POW. Okay, so there you go. 1 year of service is the law, right? So there is a mandatory service period. Um, Yeah. So I think overall, I think that's what you're seeing. You're seeing the huge disparity between Russia's very large military and the disparity, it just has a larger range than I think you're likely to see in the US. And the US military definitely also has a range. There's always the memes of the dumpy looking soldier or the soft Air Force person, in contrast to like the yoked Ranger or SF guy. Certainly true, but the baseline equipment, like you just saw in the picture of those standard infantry Marines, or they might not have even been infantry Marines. They might have literally been like MPs or something. But yeah, the delta is just a lot lower. Again, I can show you. When I was deployed 10 years ago, again, as an MP, admittedly one that was going to be owning battle space. I still had an M4 collapsible stock, ACOG. I guess I could have had an underbarrel if I wanted one. Night vision, sidearm, any smoke grenade, at least I could have wanted. Frags. Could never get flashbangs, but I never really wanted them. Your level of equipment, right? IOTV, like a predecessor to the plate carrier. So you just had a more robust set of equipment than you're seeing in these Russian troopers, or not these Russian troopers. The Russian troopers are about where we were at probably 10 years ago, but these conscripts aren't even close. Yeah, RM, that's a good point. 1 year of total service is extremely, extremely little. I can tell you that it took me so if we had a brand spanking new private, they would have 13 weeks plus our train up was 90 day. I think it's a required 90-day minimum. So I think we had, so yeah, you could still have 1 year of service. You could be deployed with as little as, what's that, 6 months of service under your belt. But it doesn't make any sense because deployments are a year. So, we would never have a 1 year conscription period full stop. But yeah, 1 year is not enough time to master, to even bring your units up to speed. Scollins, yeah, you would be. Yeah, we have a. Yeah, you could. It would be 6 months. Avon, yes, I actually read that. So what Avon's talking about in chat is that in Russia, there was this culture among conscripts where if you were a first-year conscript, you would, in addition to your basic training, you would be expected to serve the second and third year conscripts, but like it was like bullying. It was a frightening level of bullying. So like bullying, but it would involve beatings. It was like being the lowest rung. It was like being how can I put it? It was being one of those people in prison. You know what I'm talking about? How there's people who've committed certain crimes in prisons who are instantly, by virtue of their crime, the bottom of the prison totem pole. They'll get their food stolen, beaten up. If they're lucky, they'll be allowed to like, make somebody's bed and do their laundry. Imagine bullying freshman year in prison. That's sort of what we're looking at. Yeah, it was more than hazing. It was like, at least the accounts that I had read, like sometimes soldiers were just beaten to, like conscripts would just be beaten to death, right? Like that's the level of bullying we're talking about. Not even like like, those frats where sometimes people die in the hazing rituals, a little bit like that for the whole year, right? But I think they also used to like steal their money and stuff. So it was just a terrible culture, right? It was just super vicious, super cruel, and not militarily productive, right? You don't want, like, it's hard enough to have an all volunteer military that can be an effective fighting force, and everyone wants to be there. Everyone's signed up. So it's like even worse if you have a military where people hate being there. Yeah, where your comrades in arms are your biggest enemy, are the people who are most brutal to you. Like, yeah, absolutely. I'm surprised there aren't more Russian troops surrendering to Ukrainians. I know Judo Joker's like, what? I can't imagine. If you watch Russian prisons, are probably like civilized, right? There's probably just like strong ironclad gangs, and it's just like, you're from this region, you're in this gang. I have no idea. Yeah, Israel, Singapore, no, Sweden has an effective, I think, or Switzerland has a very effective conscript military. I think that this is I think it's particular. It's not inherent to conscripts. I think it's inherent to this like really toxic Russian conscript military culture. And you hope that doing something like spending time in places like the VDV and in other like professional units don't have that culture, but it doesn't shock me, right, that these guys are treated really badly. They have virtually no experience. And remember, you have to think about the way the U.S. military operates is that you have individuals that train and build their skill sets, and that starts at basic training. But then they have the units, right? Because you have to have a squad that can do all of its squad missions, and you have to have a platoon that can do all the platoon missions you can ask it to do, right? And then you have to have companies, battalions, brigades, and they all have to practice just doing stuff as a unit, right? And oh yeah, South Korea is another great example of a conscript military. So you have to train in the US as a unit. And the truth is the units have they're always changing personnel. Personnel are always leaving, they're always entering. And, US forces, they change, they will cycle through people every 4 years or so. So every 4 years, people will leave a base or be reassigned. So those units, right, they rotate through at 1/4 the rate, presumably, of this 1 year Russian conscript, right? And it takes a long time to get a unit to be trained to fight together, that the battalion commander and his staff understand how to give orders to the brigade, or the brigade commander and his staff understand how to command their battalions. Those battalions understand how to command their companies. Those companies understand how to lead and command their platoons. And the platoons know how to get the job done and know their role in the fight, right? And so to make a unit function, you need someone who's had their basic training: shoot your rifle, drive your tank, change the oil on your Humvee, right? They have those basic individual skills, but then you have to put them in a unit that also has to grow its unit skills. Hey, how does the maintenance company prioritize its work? How do we, how do you manage the schedule? How do you do complex repairs that involve 5 or 6 people, right? All those sort of things, right? How does a military police company work together to design a patrol schedule? How do they ensure maneuver and mobility support? How do they recon 250 miles of routes, right? These are all the skills that you need a company to work together to do. And it takes a long time to pull these things off, right? It takes a long time to build those skills and that's with volunteer soldiers who want to be there basically, and who don't go anywhere for 4 years. So I can't even imagine how poor and unready these Russian conscripts are for this fight. I mean, again, not like the Ukrainians. I'm sure they're drawing in a lot of folks as well, but they at least have a robust military that's got a lot of experience, and their regular workaday infantry people are pretty experienced. Oh, interesting. They cut off the Russians from Swift. Okay, that is good. Yeah. Yeah, that is really interesting. That the oh, thanks for the sub, Dom Fay here. Let's see if we can see if we can. There you go. Boom. Gotta recognize. Boom. RM, yeah, that totally sounds believable. Interesting. Beadlow, dumb as a rock. Yeah, that's really unfortunate. And that's another function. I mean, it's hard. The US spends a lot of money on its personnel in the military. And for good reason. Like you point out, is that, the truth is, US soldiers, some of them are definitely dumb as rocks, but the majority are competent, right? And a lot of them are actually kind of brilliant. So you end up with, you can have, right, you can have a private in the infantry who potentially can do high-level algebra, can read and understand an entire field manual, who can, follow along with like complex tasks, who can do things like show up on time, not be drunk at formation. You say, you act like this is some wild skill, but like you don't appreciate it until you see people who don't have it, right? Like he's like 415 and Avon are talking about, you get these armies that consist of just dirtbags, and it can be so hard to do literally anything when you just have this level of like dirtbaggery. Just getting all of your soldiers in one place at one time, sober enough to safely shoot, can be a challenge. No. I'm agreeing with you, 415. Like the US, as much as I dunk on the average soldier, they are much, much smarter. Yeah, they can be a little weeby sometimes, but yeah, no, I think you're spot on. It's a huge problem. And it's a huge advantage that the US has, that it pays enough to recruit quality recruits who have a basic level of literacy, numeracy, and can do things like show up on time, follow directions. Those are all skills that you don't appreciate how rare they are until you see when you don't have them. Right. Having a bunch of people, I mean, I imagine that for a Russian commander, having troops in your unit who are not only want to be there and show up on time and aren't addicted to alcohol or drugs, but also are nerds about guns, would be like a godsend, right? And I think I think a lot of the military, especially the infantry, they just love being infantry. They're just true true like goons. You know what I mean? They love being goons. And yeah. Um, let's see. Dunking on weebs. I mean, I can't dunk too much on weebs because everyone's a weeb now, you know? The US military does run on Monster energy drinks, which is again not great, but better than vodka, right? Let's see. Yep, Kodiak, I think you're absolutely right. I think a lot of US forces, we assumed when we went to Afghanistan to train Afghans, like we didn't appreciate that the Afghan military oftentimes looked like sort of what Avon and 415 were talking about with the Russian military, where it was just sort of you were drawing in or catching the people who had no other prospects, no other couldn't do any other job, couldn't really do anything else, and it just were like roped into this bottom tier. This was seen as like the bottom tier job, and so you ended up with people who, like, again, couldn't, for example, were either too what's the word I want? I'm trying to think of the polite word. I'm just going to say we're too stupid or uncoordinated, or just weren't up to being able to, for example, do jumping jacks, right? I do a jumping jack, my arms and legs go up and out, too complex for them. Not being able to stand in a line because they were high on opioids or stand up straight, very simple. Yeah, I would definitely say that the level of doom scrolling probably isn't a great call. In fact, we're coming up on an hour just talking about this, which I enjoy, but I definitely think we should. Oh my, the logistics of the ANA AMP, right? And Mackerel Dude, you bring up a really good point. Is that one of the things that let's see. Oh, interesting. Sorry, there's just some video. I just want to see. All right, all right, I'm not gonna watch war videos, or I don't want to watch videos of combat on here. Yeah, the lack of record keeping. So one of the things you don't appreciate is that no matter how good your troops are, if they don't have the supplies and logistics to fight, they need obviously medical care, they need food, water, they need bullets, they need to fix their vehicles, fix their weapons when they break, and all of these things need to be done at a top tier level, right? It is the difference between success and failure, especially when you're like Russia and you're in when you're the attacker, right? You're the one whose supply lines have to hold. Ukraine, up to a point as a defender, right? The closer you get to your depots, right, the better your supply situation gets, up to a point, right? At some point, if the enemy takes your supply depot, then it becomes an issue. But yeah, the problem is the U.S. has top tier logistics people, right? To the point where private companies like FedEx and stuff will actually go in and try to poach military logisticians because they're so good, and it's one of the only organizations where you can realistically have a person who sits there and goes, yes, I've actually moved 50,000 individual units of supply parts to an entire brigade, right? I did all the brigade armaments. So like, oh, of course I know how to move, 500, 600, 800, 1,000 tons a day of bullets or POL or whatever. And if you don't have those kind of people, right? They don't need to be ultra fit. They don't need to be like, biceps, bench pressing, 300 pounds, but they have to be smart and they have to be organized, really, really organized. And again, if you've ever done recruiting, that's hard to find in the US. And the fact that the US military can find people who can do it and grow them internally, right? The military can take someone who's a 19-year-old kid, and by the time they're 30, they are able to handle these 5,000-6,000 person units and handle all of their ammunition needs, all of their food needs, all of their water needs is pretty incredible. And if you can't do that, if again what they're saying is true, that there's a lot of corruption in the Russian military and just not a lot of competence in these support roles, then that's going to set your military up for failure. It's going to set your best troops up for failure, right? Again, Delta Force wouldn't be Delta Force if they didn't have the best gear that always worked every time, right? If they don't have batteries with their nods, they can't own the night. If they don't have someone to go to fix them when they break, they need this aircraft, and those aircraft have to run not an hour later, not a day later. They have to run to the minute that they need them. And all of that doesn't depend on being super tough or having great tattoos or having the crazy beard like Captain Price does, right? It just depends on a dude who's a little dumpy, a little overweight, but if they're a genius at logistics, then, welcome to JSOC, amigo. Right, but this is the reality. This is the reality of any military operation. Is that if you have logistics problems, the individual skills and the combat capacity of your troops, and even the lethality of your technology, won't help you. Right, the greatest, you could have the father of all bombs, right? You could have a bomb that kills only Ukrainian soldiers, right? It just leaves Russians and civilians alone. But if it can't get from Moscow to Ukraine, right, then it doesn't matter. All right. Yes, Judo makes a good point. This is also why NATO is so dangerous, because it's standardized. Every NATO rifle can take the exact same magazine. They shoot the exact same round. All of their planes can talk to each other. They can land at each other's airports. The level of coordination and collaboration is huge. We saw it when we watched the Portuguese in the car. You noticed that they were able to use a standard NATO radio protocol in English. It was sort of incredible because it was exactly the radio protocol that I was trained to use. That Portuguese combat commander would have gotten dropped into Afghanistan, and he would have been able to coordinate with aircraft just as well as I had. And it's pretty cool. Now I think most of the magazines are interchangeable. I think that's why they call them Stanags. Standard, like it's like Stanag standard issue armament NATO magazine. So yeah, the Warsaw Pact definitely did standardize munitions, but again, you see sort of the issue there. And Icarus, yeah, you bring up a good point about logistics, right? Good gear is only good if you have enough of it. You can have the greatest gear in the world, as we see, right? Those airborne troopers have the best gear in the world, but they can't fight. They can only fight as long as they have ammo and food, and to get resupplied, they need those mechanized forces to link up with them. And those mechanized forces didn't look terribly enthused or well equipped. So anyway, guys, I agree. There's been a little bit of doom scrolling, but I've had fun talking about this. Would you guys want to stick around? We can play some Tarkov, distract ourselves, right? Who needs this level of doom scrolling, right? Is there any other questions that you guys had that you wanted to talk about? Yeah. I'm literally gonna like switch. I'm gonna change the stream info and change the tag and switch to playing some Tarkov. I've wanted to kind of all day. That's really interesting. So there's footage of them with an AS valve but no optic. Kodiak. Okay. The reason that you're seeing the different things about Kiev is that it's possible that some Russians have entered Kiev. For example, like even the president of Ukraine said, hey, there's sabotage teams. There's So there may be small teams that enter Kiev on like the outskirts, but I imagine that the main body of Russian forces are probably not there yet. Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not gonna put on here any images, anything of actual combat, both to be as a precaution against Twitch terms of service and out of general respect for the fact that this isn't a historic event. This is an ongoing conflict, right? Even like grainy footage of combat, that's still someone's son, someone's daughter that could have been killed in that. So, because uh, it's not historic as an event yet. I don't want to show it. What do I think of Zelensky's leadership? So his um I so history, it's hard. Being a wartime leader is tough. He is, I think, doing all the right things. If you want a really good read about it, it's there's a Elliot Cohen, who's actually was for a long time the director of SICE, the Johns Hopkins School of International Service, where I did my master's. He wrote a book called something. He wrote a book, profiles in leadership, maybe. Let me see if I can look it up. Let's see. But he talked about what it takes to Cohen book. Okay, his book was or is let's see. There's two Elliot Cohens. Okay. I'm talking about this guy, Elliot A. Cohen. Supreme Command, I think, was his favorite one. Yeah. Supreme Command looked like what I'm talking about here. And Supreme Command profiles statesmen, right, who were leaders of their countries in times of war. And he breaks down some of the things that make them so brilliant. And a lot of times what makes them brilliant is the ability of them to coordinate and collaborate and make many different stakeholders with many different objectives work together to achieve effects. These can be, his example was like Chamberlain in France, right? In World War I, where half of the country got taken over by Germany, and he had to collaborate not only with his own parliament, opposition parties, the military, but also with his allies, the UK, Belgium, and they all had to literally fight side by side and fight a war together. So it was a hard thing to do. And so I think for Zelensky, right, he appears to be doing all the right things. He's trying to bring in as many people as he can, coordinate, both look inward and externally, until the problem is we don't see what's going on beneath the surface. If he's certainly, he looks like he's doing all the right things, right? He's in Kiev. He's at the center of things. He's actively rallying his people. He's projecting an image of seriousness and calm, but rational optimism. So, I think he is. Chamberlain, the World War I prime minister in France. I think. I'll be very curious to know when all this is over and the things that went on within his cabinet, within his intelligence community, how he coordinated. I'll be very curious to learn that, because this guy, remember, he is a comedian. His background is not in, politics or the military or any of it. So he is relying on, and maybe he's wisely playing to his strengths, right? He's great in front of a camera, and they're like, yes, your strengths are rallying people, getting them to believe in you, and like, yes, you need to spend the maximum amount of time talking directly to the public because you're so good at it. It's your best skill. And so, I think that definitely right there says that he's a person who may be self-aware. But again, it's so hard to know. Behind closed doors, he could be I mean, who knows? Who knows what sort of decisions he's making and who he's
So I
listening
said,
to?
no, it was supposed to be my pentakill. Why did you that to me? I killed down no 1, 2, 3 for champions. I can't believe it.